Well, hello everybody and welcome to the channel. I usually say welcome back, but over the weekend I got quite a bump from a shout out from a friend of mine in Oregon, his name being Brett Metter. He mentioned me during his church service, and over the weekend alone I gained about 600 new subscribers. So to those of you that are among those new subscribers, I want to welcome you to the channel. Now, regardless of whether or not you're a subscriber, don't forget at the end of the video to give it a thumbs up. It helps the video climb through the YouTube algorithm, which then promotes it to other viewers, okay, to enlarge the circles of audience that it reaches. I also received positive feedback from my first foray into Bible studies. Usually I just do Israel updates since I started this channel, but at the end of the week on Friday, I decided to do a chapter of Ezekiel chapter 36 in our own time. That's the name of the video. And it received a lot of positive feedback, and people had asked me to do more Bible studies as part of the channel, and I've decided to do that. In other words, this channel exists for you, and therefore if the audience wants more Bible studies, I'm going to do that. Now, sometimes these videos will be just an Israel update, particularly relating to the war against Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Sometimes it will be, as it was in the case of Ezekiel 36, exclusively a Bible study. And today, it will be an amalgamation of both. I wanted to begin by saying that in that teaching I did on Ezekiel, I mentioned that I was going to refer to God every time I saw the word Lord, all four letters being in capital English letters, L-O-R-D, that I was going to refer to Yahweh's proper name. Okay, that's the proper name of the God of Israel is revealed in the burning bush to Moses. And I said in that video that many believe that to be a compression of all tenses, the three tenses of the verb to be, was, is, and will be, all in one word, denoting his eternal nature. Now, since I made that video on Friday, I learned that the name Yahweh appears some 6,800 times in the Hebrew Bible. Okay, that's an incredible amount of time. And I said that I was going to refer to him by that name in order to distinguish him from other deities or from generic names for God, or to distinguish him from Islam's Allah. Now, Muslims, of course, would argue that it's the same God. Okay, according to Islamic theology, the Quran came to fix what the Jews and Christians did to pervert the scriptures. In other words, according to the Muslim religion, the Quran is the true word of the God, the one monotheistic God of Judaism, Christianity, and as they say, also Islam. But I had mentioned in that video on Friday that the Allah of Islam has a pre-Islamic heritage that's very different from the heritage of Yahweh, the deity of Israel, who had intervened in world history by declaring himself to be the God of Israel. Now, that very term, Elohei Yisrael, is mentioned in the Bible, and I'm looking down here at a note, some 53 times. And another name or title for God that I wanted to mention at the outset in this video is the Lord of Hosts. Okay, now in English, Lord of Hosts, in Hebrew, Elohei Tsevaot. Now, many people have different opinions as they've weighed in. What does that mean, Lord of Hosts? Okay, some people believe that it's God, the Lord of the host of heaven. And for those of you that believe in the New Testament, of course, this should recall when Jesus returns in the book of Revelation with the army of heaven. Okay, so that's the host of heaven. But many people, including myself, will say that usually in the Hebrew Bible, or what Christians call the Old Testament, it's to be taken literally. God of armies. That's how it's translated, God of armies. Now, it could mean God of war, in other words, God of all armies, for the God of the Bible is the God of history. okay, the sovereign of history, who's intervened in history and changed its trajectory at times through war. Okay, and I'll claim that he's doing that now in the Israel-Hamas war. And therefore, he's not just the God of maybe a particular army, but of warfare in general, or in armies in general. Now, of course, this goes against the grain of a lot of Christians who like to present God exclusively as this God of love, who just winks his eye at his children down on earth, just loves everything they're doing, like a doting granddad. And that's just not what the Bible reveals. It's sometimes that's God's nature, but other times he's a God of war. Okay, now a lot of times in the Hebrew Bible, Elohei Tzevaot means the God of the Israeli army in particular. And I would say actually in all of the times that that term appears in the Bible, some 260 times, that it's usually referring to Yahweh as the chief of staff or the general at the top of the hierarchy leading the armies of Israel. And therefore, when we combine the two terms, Elohei Tzevaot and Yahweh, the national deity of Israel's proper name, which again appears some 6,800 times, it should impress upon everyone who reads the Bible that the God of the Bible is inexorably linked with a particular people group which he made an everlasting covenant with, which means until this very day it's still valid, and that's none other than national Israel. Since the time he decided to intervene in history as the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, then Moses, and all the other Israelite fathers, he is the God of Israel. Now, of course, not everybody likes that. And you have segments of Christianity called replacement theology that feel that life has moved on since then, that God is now strictly the God of the church or Christianity, which has replaced Israel in its national covenants. The problem is the Bible doesn't teach that. The Bible teaches that God's particular relationship with Israel is unconditional and forever. Don't confuse the Abrahamic and Mosaic covenants. The Abrahamic covenant's forever. Nothing can abort that. That is entirely contingent on Yahweh's faithfulness alone, as opposed to the Mosaic covenant, which is conditional. Okay, it's we the Jews were commanded to follow some 613 commandments. And if we didn't follow them, and let's say we made it a practice habitually not to follow them, then it would bring down the displeasure of God on our heads. And the list of what would happen when we cause his displeasure is mentioned in the books of Numbers and Deuteronomy, okay? And I mentioned in the last video in Ezekiel 36, when I related it to Jeremiah 31:31, that the prophets of Israel foresaw a new covenant that would surpass the covenant of Sinai, okay, the Mosaic covenant. The Torah written in stone would then be written in the Torah of the heart, okay? But don't conflate or confuse that with the Abrahamic covenant. The Abrahamic covenant, which God made with the Jewish people forever to give them the land of Israel as an everlasting possession and to be their God, or our God, because I'm saying this as a Jewish person, is everlasting and contingent on Yahweh's faithfulness alone. And there we go for today's Bible study. I didn't cover a chapter of scripture, but instead I decided to take up a scriptural principle, okay, of the identity of our God, Yahweh. Now, moving on to today's developments. Last night, or let's say in the last 24 hours, Israel's destroyed 450 Hamas positions in the stronghold of Gaza City in the northern Gaza Strip. This is unbelievable. Okay, the tally that I just said to you, 450 Hamas sites in the last 24 hours have been destroyed as Israel tightens its stranglehold on the Gaza Strip and has dropped more munitions on the Gaza Strip in the last couple of days than it has in the whole history of the conflict with Gaza in years past, and succeeded to assassinate last night one of the chief architects of the massacre of October 7th. Now, I'm showing you some footage as I speak of the war effort over the last 24 to 48 hours. And here you're seeing footage of an Israeli tank taking out a building that belongs to Hamas, okay, with one of its tank cannons. And you're also seeing several munitions and explosions of various Hamas targets scattered throughout the Strip. But my favorite one is the one in this final footage of a dog. The dog being sent into the tunnel network of Hamas. And as he approaches one of the Hamas fighters, the Hamas fighter, all he can do is yell out in desperation, Allahu Akbar in Arabic, which means Allah is greater. And then the video is cut off. We don't know what happened to that person. Now, Israel's not using dogs only. It's using state-of-the-art robots to destroy many of these tunnels. Now, the Israeli army has not published any footage of these robots because they're still of a classified nature, but I've read that many of the tunnels are being destroyed by robots in addition to the aerial assault, which is taken out alone by itself without the robots, over 150 of these Hamas tunnels. And I've mentioned earlier, this is out of a network of what's believed to be something like 300 miles of Hamas tunnels, which explains why there's so much collateral damage among Gaza's civilian population. Israel drops a bomb on a tunnel network, it destroys the tunnel infrastructure, and then you have Palestinian apartment blocks built on these tunnels. As the tunnels collapse, so do the buildings above them, and that explains the collateral damage, or I would say most of the collateral damage in the war. Now, don't forget that since this war started, Israel has asked everybody in the northern Gaza Strip, in that northern Hamas compound, to leave. Okay, and in the last couple weeks, 800,000 Gazans answered the call, and they did leave. But it's estimated, unfortunately, that another 400,000, between 200,000 and 400,000, remain behind, even though Israel warned them that to do so meant certain death. Okay, and how are those people dying? Unfortunately, Hamas had no regard for their lives as they built a network of tunnels under their apartment blocks so that when the tunnels were destroyed, the apartment blocks collapsed, okay? So that's what's going on. I don't know how much of the news has covered that that's why people are dying in Gaza, but that's why a lot of the people are dying in Gaza. Now, I never take Hamas's health ministry's tally of total deaths literally because it's war. And in war, you've heard the expression that all is fair in love and war. And Hamas claims that over 10,000 Gazan citizens have died. Now, a lot of the news quotes that and takes that, as gospel. I don't, okay? Because we're in the midst of a war, and the enemy will say whatever he thinks prudent to advance his war interests, to put the pressure on Israel, and it's working. President Biden and Blinken, the Secretary of State, are feeling the pressure from the casualties in the Gaza Strip, as well as their leftward flank in their own party. In the last couple of days, it was news that President Biden's starting to feel the heat of Michigan. Michigan, as you know, is a swing state in the national election. It's got a huge Muslim population. You have a city in Michigan called Dearborn, which is almost entirely Arab and Muslim. And they've said that they're not going to vote for him because of his very pro-Israel stance. Now, I've been very fair to Joe Biden since this began, and I've enumerated on these videos all the things that he's done, and I'll just do it again to remind you. He made some of the most pro-Israel speeches in the history of the presidency. He told Benjamin Netanyahu in their meeting with one another that he, Joe Biden, was a Zionist. That's the first time I remember a president in the United States coming outright and saying that he's a Zionist. And that alone caused him to be persona non grata with this country's Arab population here in the United States. He has sent 2 aircraft carrier battle groups. Each one of those groups has 20 ships. Combined, they have over 350 or so Tomahawk missiles. And to add to that, just today, a nuclear submarine has been added to all that. That nuclear submarine has 154 of its own Tomahawk missiles to add to the total lot there. Now, when I say nuclear submarine, it doesn't mean that there's nuclear weapons on the submarine, although many of America's submarines do have nuclear missiles. When you say nuclear submarine, you're saying what the power that propels that submarine is. It has a nuclear power plant on the submarine that propels it through the oceans for many months at a time, doesn't need to refuel, okay? But this particular submarine belonging to what's called the Ohio class, a class of which America only has 4 such submarines, has something like 154 Tomahawk missiles. So combined, this is a massive American armada and show of strength projected here in the Middle East. America has also warned others not to get into the war. America, under Joe Biden, has helped Israel at the United Nations Security Council by vetoing all sorts of efforts to force a ceasefire on Israel. So I've been very fair to President Biden throughout this whole war. But in honesty, you're starting to see him cave to some of the pressure from both the casualties being shown on CNN as well as the Arab Muslim population of the United States in swing states like Michigan. And of course, his most radical left-wing flank, known as the Squad in Congress, that's comprised of at least 2 Muslim women, both of whom you could argue are Hamas agents in the American Congress. And now I think I'll end this update by telling you that this weekend we saw the first instance of outer space warfare in human history when the Arrow 2, an Israeli missile, shot down an incoming Yemenite ballistic missile when it was outside of Earth's atmosphere. Now, there may have been military practices in the past of shooting down ballistic missiles when they were outside the Earth's atmosphere, but this was the first time that actual warfare has taken place in outer space, and it happened again when Israel shot down with its Arrow 2 anti-ballistic missile, a Yemenite ballistic missile on its way to the southern port city of Eilat. Anyway, guys, that concludes today's update. Again, I welcome all of you and thank every one of you who have subscribed to the channel over the weekend. And I'm planning to do a Bible study with you in the next day or two, whose title will be Who Started This Whole Middle East Conflict? And I think my answer may surprise a lot of you. So think about it. Write in the comment if you think you know where I'm leading on this. Who really started this Middle East conflict? I'll give you a hint. It's a person in the Bible. Anyway, this is Steve the tour guide signing off and thanking you. Be safe, be vigilant, and be blessed. Bye-bye.